It always makes me jump.
I know, and we did a call the other week and totally forgot to. We just got chatting, and there were some really great things that were coming up, questions and stuff. I'm like, oh shoot, we haven't recorded yet. Boy.
Get organised. Oh dear. Well, I've messaged Mickey and I've messaged Libby. If they join us, they join us.
Yeah,
Maybe they're finishing their dinner. You never know.
you never know. Well, let's get started.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah. Like I said, thank you. I'm Alexia. I've not met you before.
And
Hi.
I kind of saw you at the shop today, didn't I? But I was in such a rush. I was in and out because I had a meeting with Kia because I'm trying to build the website and the shop, the online shop for the Dog HQ. Yes, it is Dog HQ.
Mhm.
It was just carnage. It was just a crazy day.
I
But
can't actually see very well at the minute. Sorry, it's
that's
not. Um,
it's hiding.
I'm just trying to change the view because I don't like seeing myself particularly so close up.
So where you can go, let's find
That's top
that.
right, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, if you go to the top right corner, are you on a phone or on your laptop?
On the laptop.
Okay, so if you go up to the top right corner, you should see view and then some boxes right next to it. Some little square.
Yeah.
Okay, you can switch it to, oh, here comes Mickey, gallery.
Uh, oh, yeah, that's better. Less of me. Great. Right.
Oh, here she go.
Hi, Mickey. Just to let you know, we are recording.
And you're muted.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Hello. Hello.
No, here. I'm here. Sorry, I had to wipe the Lord's face
Oh,
because
well,
he was trying to scratch, so
oh,
headlock time. Yeah, dealt with.
poor Baba. Poor Baba.
Hello, welcome.
Hello.
How are you? Are you good?
Yeah, good. You?
Yeah. I feel a bit like that today.
Has it been a day?
Yeah, because I've now taken over the project for the shop of building the website for deliveries.
Oh, that's exciting though.
It is, but it's a huge project, so wish me luck.
Well, I'm here if you need any help.
Well, maybe just send chocolate and
Yeah,
tiramisu.
yeah.
That would be great. That would help me.
Well,
immensely.
have you heard that I'm doing a pop-up?
Oh, at the shop, yes, but it's Easter, isn't it? You're doing it. Easter
Mm.
weekend. Can you do something tiramisu based for me?
Yeah. Stick in a cheesecake egg or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything tiramisu, and I'm sold.
Anything. I'm down.
We're connoisseurs. All the stuff that the dogs aren't allowed, I will eat.
I can sort something out.
Oh, oh dear.
Well, we wanted to just start off with our new little group and just have a chat and introduce ourselves to you guys and introduce ourselves to one another. And also just to kind of get a sense of what it is that, well, to explain a little bit of what we're thinking about with Fetch, why we started this and what was the impetus for it. But also to get a sense of what you guys are looking for, what you need help with. Um, what kinds of resources we can be creating, and that will help us shape the way that Fetch kind of develops. Because we definitely want it to be member led, where we're able to give you what it is that we have ideas of what we think would be great to share with you. But if that's not actually going to be helpful for you, that's not helpful, right? We want to make sure that we're providing things that are actually useful for you. So we just thought it would be fun to kick things off and have an actual conversation, um, and just see how it goes.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
If that sounds
Yep.
good. Do you want us to
Sounds good.
start with a little bit of what we were initially thinking, why we started Fetch, and then kind of
Mm.
it up? Would that be helpful to kind of give a context, and maybe that will help tee up
Yeah.
what you're looking for? Okay.
Yeah.
So Stacy and I jump in at any
I
time.
will. I'll interject when I feel necessary.
So if you don't know me, I'm Alexia. I am the host of Mystic Dog Mama podcast, and I'm also the owner of the Mystic Dog Mama Holistic Canine Nutrition and Wellbeing Consultancy. And Stacy and I first met. Here's Lucky. This is my little Bubba Lucky. Stacy and I first met on our iPet level 3 canine nutrition courses. And then we continued together through the APNC, the Associated Pet Nutrition Consultant membership or mentorship rather. And
Mhm.
we started to see, I think both of us through our courses and then through the mentorship where we were doing actual case studies with actual dogs, we had very similar cases to one another, and some of them really, really challenging that didn't fit the traditional kind of mold. And we started looking at like that one, right?
Like that one. He's a
Yeah.
prime example of one that doesn't mold.
And
Mhm.
it comes from as well that the dogs that didn't fit the mold were actually really mimicking the situations we had with our own personal dogs, which is how we both got into canine nutrition. It was my dog Lucky that you just met came
Mm.
into my life very unexpectedly, and presented with kidney issues, GI issues. I was in Mexico at the time. I was visiting my mom just before COVID hit, and decided to stay there with her because we didn't know what was going on. And a neighbor knocked on the door and said, "Can you foster this dog?" So I wasn't prepped for, oh, I'm going to get a dog and all of that kind of stuff. It literally just showed up at my door. And then he started presenting with some serious health challenges. And my vet flat out told me, I don't know anything about nutrition. I don't know how to guide you with this. And being in that context of Mexico, where we don't have a dog HQ there,
Mhm.
there's not the dog industry there. I had to figure out how to do all of this on my own. And with a kidney diet, having to be pretty specific with stuff, it's a more serious health condition that you have to be a little bit more vigilant with how you're feeding. And so I had to learn how to do it. And that's why I studied canine nutrition first for him and then to be able to help others. And so
Mm.
jump forward into us doing our mentorship, coming across some similar cases, not necessarily specifically kidney in my case, but all different health challenges where we were often the kind of last port of call. People had tried the vets, the behaviorists, they've tried every drug, they tried every diet, they've done everything, and they were at personal overwhelm with what was going on. But also there was not everything was happening in a silo. The vet wasn't talking to the vet behaviorist, wasn't talking to the chiropractor. It was trying to figure everything out. And Stacy and I take a very truly holistic approach. So not just natural products, but looking at the dog as an ecosystem and the house as an ecosystem, right? That we know that our emotions, our situations impact our dogs. And that's not about blaming, but it's recognizing there is a relationship, there's an impact. And so
Mm.
it's a point of control it's something we can take control over. It's also something that gives us insight into what's going on. And we're both very interested as a result of that in energy practices like traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic approaches, energy healing approaches, the kind of unseen aspects to health that don't get talked
Mm.
about so much in the West, but putting it allowed us to get curious, which is the C part of Fetch, and ask different questions. And time again, it was through us asking different questions, and we collaborated with one another on our more difficult cases and saw we're coming into some of the same kinds of issues. We're approaching it in a similar sort of way. And we're seeing what is missing in this industry, where when you typically come to a canine nutritionist, you're given like a recipe. We might formulate a recipe for you. And then you might have some email contact with us for, a couple of weeks afterwards. But what happens when there's a flare up 3 months from now? Or what happens when you're not sure about how to put those puzzle pieces together? You think you've understood what we've said, and then you're like, but I feel completely overwhelmed again. And actually, my dog's now doing this behavior that seems completely unrelated, but what's going on? So we
Mm.
think that we need to shift the industry. This isn't just about providing another kind of membership. This is about grassroots level movement of the entire industry needs to shift the way that we're talking about and thinking about health generally. And that is both for us as the humans and for the dogs. And there's a direct relationship between the two. And there's an invitation between the two. Of when we're caring for ourselves, we care for our dogs. When we're caring for our dogs, we care for ourselves. And so we wanted to kind of create a space to have these conversations, to provide resources, and to essentially teach you the framework that we use when we're meeting with you as a nutrition client. So, what are we looking at from the vantage point of a nutritionist that has this knowledge and background and has a history of working with a number of different dogs and we've seen patterns? What is the framework that we're using to have to start to kind of figure out what's going on? That's what we want to teach you so that you can catch things before they become a problem. And you can do that in a community of like-minded people to have that support, but also to recognize it's really hard when our dogs aren't well. And it's really hard when our dogs, right? And that side of things that doesn't get addressed in a recipe, right? It's providing that not only the framework, but the level of support that we know is needed for healing, that we know is needed for transformation because we've gone through it with our own personal dogs and we've supported countless clients on that same journey. So we decided to team up because, again, it's about collaboration. And honestly, to be like a big part of this too is about this new paradigm of women's coming together and using our voices and creating that shift, speaking up, create and providing that space of like the divine feminine energy, right? Like teaming up and making the changes that need to happen in this world. And it starts with us. It's not waiting for the change to happen out there. It starts right here. And it's powerful when two or more people come together. There's real power. So we wanted to create, kind of bring out our little cauldrons, add some magic, and create that space for transformation, not just with our dogs, but with ourselves, in our communities, and that ripple effect. So that's what we talk about it being a movement and not just about what should I feed my dog? What should I feed my dog is part of that conversation, but it's not the whole conversation. And that's what's different about what we're trying to do.
Well, yeah.
Cool.
She just said it all, basically. Summarized it beautifully. But Alison, I don't know how much you know about whether you've seen my website or anything about me with how I ended up in this space with you know what happened with Shadow, don't you, Mikey?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll give you the very short version, Alison. Essentially, I had a 12-week-old Springer Spaniel puppy arrive in October 2016, and I had I did everything as I was told to do by the vets. I did all the conventional stuff, and he was really poorly for about the first 3 or 4 weeks of his life. He had a really nasty reaction to both of the L4 jabs, the lepto jabs. He had a nasty reaction to a flea and tick treatment, the spot on that went on his neck. And essentially what happened over the kind of next 3-4 years was just a roller coaster of issues and a really rare autoimmune condition that I still believe was absolutely connected to what happened to him as a puppy, and led to us rehoming him in August of 2020 because he had bitten both my boys because of the behavior changes that had happened, because he'd been on steroids, he'd been on immunosuppressants, he'd been on all sorts, he'd been through the ringer, bless him. And the vets were telling us that basically it was put him to sleep. But I knew that in the right environment that he would be okay. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do because he was my baby and he was. But I've got another dog called Ted who we'd adopted when Shadow was about 9 months old, and they were best friends for about 2 years until Shadow got really sick, and then it all went very, very wrong, and he was going for Ted as well. So that was part of that decision-making process. So I had to kind of go through the fact that I just adopted a dog, but then I rehomed one. It was a real roller coaster, and so I've been in this space for about 8.5 years now, because as soon as Shadow got sick, I started looking at alternative diets, and then I got into raw, and then I got into not natural treatments for flea and tick and natural treatments for worms, and I just went absolutely down a rabbit hole. So that's what's led me to doing my courses and then doing the APNC, and it's just been a roller coaster, and I just live down rabbit holes now. That's pretty much where I spend my time. So just send that would be great. So yeah, that was just me. So just because I didn't know how much you knew about what had happened with me and how I'd ended up here. So I know that when I was going through that with Shadow, that I would really have loved a community like this where I could have spoken to other people and not second guess myself as much, because as soon as you go on Google and you ask a question, you're surrounded by 15,000 answers. You go on social media and then Joe Blogs Over the Road tells you that this treatment was really great, and then someone else tells you this one, and then your Facebook feed just ends up as an advert for every single pre and probiotic for your dog, fix their itchy skin, and it's that overwhelm where you just go, I haven't got a clue. And you get kind of information paralysis where you can't make a decision because you've got too much information and you just don't know. Then you start trying everything, but you don't know which bit's working because you're not kind of doing it in a pattern or to a plan, and you end up in this kind of mess, and you just like, I don't know where to start. And it's sometimes we have to go back to basics, and that's kind of what we did with Loki, wasn't it, Mickey, when we went back? So I've worked with Mickey with Loki, the lovely sleeping bald. Is he snoring yet?
No, he's started to wake up now. It's like he's Lord.
Oh Lord, love
that honestly.
you saw him.
He knows you're talking about him. That's what it is. He's like, yes, I am the problem.
Yeah. No, you're not. We're getting there. He's done so well, but he's had a roller coaster, hasn't he, since December?
Yeah. There's been tears. There's been everything. Anything that could have gone wrong during a reset went wrong. To the point, I think I rang you, didn't I? I think he's going to lose his eye. He'd scratched his eye so bad he gave himself a corneal ulcer. Absolutely everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and I probably stitched myself up buying an English bulldog. I mean, who's asking for health problems? Obviously me. But we are well over the other side, like without a doubt. Like his toilet is the best it's ever been. Yes, he had a little bit of an itch earlier, but I mean, you can see his eyes are completely clear. Whereas Stacey has had eye pictures where they're completely closed. He couldn't open his eye for like 3 weeks at one point. And it's Stacey's magic that's got him to where he is, and it's all completely natural. We are lucky we've got an extremely good natural vet, who's supported. But it's been long.
Chris has played a really integral part, hasn't he? So Chris is a homeopathic vet based over in Forest Row that you've been working with, and that now I'm doing some work with, and we're hoping to run some workshops at the shop on kind of homeopathy for dogs and things. So, but he takes a really beautiful approach, and it really aligns with how we work. So sometimes what we do is it's not just about the nutrition side and what we do, it's about bringing in team members to support as well. So might be somebody like I just called him
Chris.
Nick. I've called
Chris.
him so many names, haven't I? I get really confused. Chris, I've got another. I use another holistic vet, or I have done in the past, called Birgit, who's a little bit further over towards Tunbridge Wells. But they are out there, and Ted has a osteo that comes to the house every 6 months to have a checkup because he's nearly 10, and he's a spaniel, so he's a wally. Runs in bushes and does all sorts of crazy stuff. So I'm just trying to be proactive in terms of looking after his joints. So it's just piecing all those puzzles together and building that people around you to support you and your dog through those changes that might happen. And that's what we want this space to be about as well, that it might be something that you haven't thought about. And when you look at something through a F.E.T.C.H lens and you get to the targeted bit, or you get curious about something and you ask a different question to what you might have asked previously, that's when the magic happens, because that's when you go, I see a pattern, that's happened, or it happens at a certain time. Like Loki was he was scratching his eyes a lot overnight, wasn't he? Which is why we triggered a detox, because that's to do with the liver overnight at the time that he was doing it. So that was signifying that his liver was potentially struggling during that time in the TCM, like the traditional Chinese medicine clock. So it's all those things that we look at to start giving us clues as to how we can best support that dog and what support they might need, rather than just going, it's a diet or it's this, that, or something else. It's a much so that's why we spend the time looking and asking the questions that we do, because they're not the traditional questions that you get asked in other places. That's why we want to dig a little bit deeper.
And that
I
it's,
suppose that's why you should keep a diary, isn't it, as well? So
Yeah,
that's,
absolutely.
and I keep getting told this, and I just don't do it. And I'm like, why aren't I doing this?
It's
And
overwhelming as well.
I almost want something that's like a tick box, like, oh, right, that's happened today, that's happened today, oh, that's happened.
but this
That
is,
would be useful,
but
like
I
a
also
template that I could just go quick
like
to,
that.
right,
Yeah, that's handy as
done.
well. That
I don't want to
we
spend
can,
ages writing everything down because it would just take me too long and too much time. And
Yeah.
well, and
I
also you
just,
don't necessarily know what to look for, right?
no,
It's like, what am I tracking? And so
yeah,
we could give you
exactly.
something that gives you a little bit of structure to start
Yeah.
tracking those things. And then in the group, we can talk in a call like this, for example, you could actually bring your tracker to us and we could talk
Mm,
about it and say, okay, so this is what we're seeing based upon that. And again,
mm,
kind of reiterate, traditionally in the West, we look at symptoms and we treat the symptom. That's the allopathic route, right?
mm,
Get rid of the symptoms. What we do is look at the root cause. We want to investigate what is the root cause. So symptoms are information. Symptoms aren't actually bad. They're information for us that's telling us
mm.
what the body is trying to do. And so it's a reframe for how we're actually approaching this. But if we could give you a checklist, that would be easier.
Yeah, that would be easier, I think.
Okay.
I'd probably be more tempted to
Okay.
kind of do it then.
And then
I think it's just life as well, just gets in the way and you just forget and you
Just other
think,
things.
oh, well, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I just never get around to it.
Yeah.
But I think it would be helpful
Yeah.
because he's a complicated case, aren't you, Harry? Legs sticking up now. But he's lovable. He's so lovely at home. But he's just out and about. We've had a few issues. Um, and he just doesn't trust men. I don't know if you know much about him. He's a Romanian rescue. Um, so we think that he's got a problem with men, maybe cyclists. It's just weird. It's the reactivity has kind of increased the longer we've had him.
Yeah.
So he used to be fine. I could take him out on little walks and we go to the park with him and he seemed fine. And then one day we were just walking back and he started reacting to cars and traffic, like big lorries in particular, or I think it's noisier
Yeah.
cars as well. And it just kind of just everything just seemed to start getting worse and worse and worse.
Allison, do you know the work of Dr. Laura Donaldson, the trainer and behaviorist who focuses on trauma-informed approaches to dogs?
No.
We'll send you our I interviewed her on the podcast and she talks about reactivity, but she's her big thing is about understanding trauma and how you need to approach dogs who have experienced trauma differently. So that might be a useful resource, an interesting conversation for you to listen to that you might pick up some things. I'll have
Yeah.
if there are some other episodes that I've done that might be useful for you as just a starting point to then see if that's a route that would be helpful for you to explore. Would that be of interest?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the other thing as well. I with the podcast, I interview different guests and then we do a Fetch First Friday. The first Friday of every month, we take a topic and run it through the Fetch lens. But I always ask people if there's a particular topic or health condition or there's a particular guest you'd like me to invite on, let me know. And if you've got particular questions, then I lead with that. So the idea
Okay.
that's also meant to be useful for people. So feel free to
Mm.
I heard such and such speaking on whatever podcast or whatever. Would you be interested in talking to them? So let me know if that would be helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
We love
I
more
think,
Calls. Yeah, go ahead.
do you know what was really interesting for me with Stacey? Obviously, when you done Loki's first consult, when you said like we worked out that liver is overnight in terms of like the Chinese clock and stuff, that's so interesting. So a bit more information about like what, I don't know, a nose issue could be linked to I don't know, an intestine. Do you know that kind of thing? That was so interesting, and it's really hard, like you say, to find stuff online. But yeah, like the link between the body parts was
Yeah.
really interesting. So something like that would be really handy.
Okay.
Mm. Yeah.
With that, we could also talk to you about seasons, and that is linked. Allison, if you're not familiar with TCM, when we're talking about this from the perspective of energetics, the idea in traditional Chinese medicine, which started with humans, obviously, but it applies to everything, is that every living being has an energetic profile. So it's that idea of like, the person who's always hot no matter what the temperature is, or the person who's always cold no matter what the temperature is. That's aspect of energetics. And our dogs mimic that same pattern. And the idea is that health comes from balance and harmony. The body is always trying to come into homeostasis. So again, the symptoms are actually the body trying to come back into a sense of balance, and it's telling us where a blockage might be, where an issue might be. And it also corresponds, one of the great questions that I was introduced to around TCM is always in relation to what? So my dog is hot in relation to what? My dog is reactive in relation to what? My dog is better at this time in relation to this time, right? So it's this kind of comparison approach to things. And also take into account, so with that in relation to even the climate and the seasons, that the body is going through different things. Right now in spring is actually, Mickey, the liver season. It's the liver gallbladder season. So this is when the body
Okay.
it's so we start to see things like itching, for example, but we also see things like irritability, anger, frustration, annoyance, that kind of a thing, because the liver governs those emotions. So reactivity can be increased as well. So again, so it's like when being more reactive, it may or may not be that specific trigger. It could also be exaggerated by the particular season we're in, because that's what the body is doing, is getting rid of stuff that it's stored over winter.
Yeah.
Right. So when you start to look at it
Yeah.
from different perspectives, it gives you more information and it gives you other entry points into working with
And
it.
to ask other questions that could be related to that, because it is that whole thing about you don't know what you don't know until you start digging a little bit deeper and taking that next step away from that question and going, oh, and then you start to join some dots and you're like, and then you get the light bulb. And it's when you start to ask those questions, but it's learning how to ask those questions. That's the real trick. And that's the bit that we love.
We love it.
Well, it's funny you said about like liver, because Loki was back with Chris, obviously Stacey, on Monday, and we've noticed quite a bit of discharge coming out of Loki's eyes. They're not irritated or anything. They're just quite heavily discharging. And Chris said the exact same thing, that he's just having another detox, clearing out all of the eye issues, and then we'd be back on the home stretch. So yeah, that makes sense.
That's why you get a lot of the dogs with tear stains and stuff as well, and the constantly gunky runny eyes, and they get the big eye boogers and stuff. It's generally because there's some congestion or something going on within that liver. And we'd be looking at where dogs might be chewing as well in particular places. Like even you're lucky that you've been with me for just over a week, and Lucky was chewing in certain places on his legs. And then we double checked and we're like, that's gallbladder, and that's lit, and it all fitted. So you've been tailoring over the last week and already seen a massive reduction in what he's doing. So it's easy looking at the points on their body that they're chewing and where they're nibbling, because that will have a thing. And Loki's eyes have always been the issue, haven't they? So it's always been about the liver and something not quite right going on with it. So that's why the focus, and it tied in with the time when he was doing it, where he was rubbing and how he was rubbing. So that's probably come from being a puppy, and it's balancing that and creating that his system so that his liver can work effectively and do what it's meant to do.
We will be there.
Yeah, and also it doesn't mean, we should probably clarify, in Chinese medicine, it's not always about that organ. It doesn't mean for organ, it means the liver system, and which is tied into a bunch of different organs and meridians. It's the way that the energy passes through the body. And every living being is born with a particular, we all have all of the components, the 5 elements, but we have a dominant element. So it could be, for example, that Loki's dominant element is the wood element associated with the liver, and the liver and the eyes are connected. So it doesn't mean that he necessarily has an eye problem or a liver problem. It's just that's his dominant feature. For my Lucky, he is definitely kidney water. Definitely, which is also associated with the winter. So I tend to see more problems with him in the winter. So I know as we're coming into autumn, start boosting him, start feeding him specific foods to boost the kidneys, because that's what they're associated with. Give him extra hydrating foods, because I know that that's what he struggles with. We just moved back to the UK from Mexico. He's never been here before. And I knew that I was going to have to prep for that trip. So my way of prepping specifically for him was throw every kidney support at him that I could before we got on that plane, right? Leading up to it, weeks leading up to it, because I know that's his weak spot. He doesn't have a kidney problem. It's just his dominant system. And so if he's going to get sick, that's where it's going to happen for him. Right. So, and when you know
Yeah.
this about your dog, it's kind of like somebody who always gets stomach bugs or somebody always gets chest infections.
Sore throats, or
Yeah.
that getting stuck in those cycle, or they're
Right.
just known for that particular thing, like migraines and all of
Yeah.
those types of things. Yeah.
And the more you get to know your dog and you then apply this lens of those systems to it, the more empowered you actually are. Because it's like I knew that he could potentially have this issue. And when he presents with something, I'm not worried about it. Right? Because I know where it's come from. And
Yeah.
that's also not having the worry. So with kidneys, they're associated with fear and worry. And so it's an invitation for me to look at how much worry and fear am I placing on him. So that's that kind of mutual relationship with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Very
definitely.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it feels overwhelming, I think, in the beginning, but once you start to get to know your dog in that way, it becomes so much easier, and you can start to see things happen before they happen, essentially, because you're
Yeah.
just like, okay, that's happened this week. Maybe I need to give a little bit of extra support. Maybe I need to do this. So the last week or so, I've upped Ted's. I've added some rosehip powder to his supplement rotation, and I'm trialing a passion flower and hawthorn, because he's heart on he's a fiery I'll put my teeth in. It's been a very long day.
He's a ginger ninja.
He's a ginger ninja. He's a very warm dog, energetically, and he's also heart based. So I'm trying to support all of those systems. So we've got Lucky here. They went through a complete love fest, didn't they, that when they first arrived? But that's still stress for him because he's nearly 10. So it's still a stress that's different for him in the house. My husband's away for 2 months. And so I was just trying to think, well, what can I do to support him during this time? So I've upped his rose hip, so that's vitamin C, and then I'm putting the passion flower in and the hawthorn. Passion flower is great for stress, hawthorn's great for supporting the heart. So it's just about thinking about how I know my dog and when I can adapt those supplements. And rather than having a supplement graveyard, that's when you can get curious about which ones are actually used and whether you use them in rotation, and whether you might do a little bit of a spring clean in the spring, and you support the liver for March for 6 weeks, a bit like we did with Loki, the detox blend right at the very beginning, which did kickstart a detox process, which started everything off, but also was the absorption, wasn't it? Because he wasn't absorbing with the raw food, was he? It was only when we swapped him to cook that actually kick-started that whole detox process, because all of a sudden his body was actually getting hold of the nutrients it needed. And that then he was like, oh, I got it now, but I'm going to go on a roller coaster. We're good to go. So that was part of that process, was, yes, that one.
That one. Yeah. And I think now, like, obviously I haven't been doing it as long as you guys, but I am starting to know a bit of a pattern. Like, we obviously spoke about pup cups. He's no longer allowed a pup cup because actually he didn't have one on Thursday. He's not scratched this week, apart from a little bit earlier, but that's fine. Whereas his eyes would be red raw at this point had he have had one on Thursday. So he has a sausage in a cup, and he's happy now.
That was I loved that, because he does everything out.
And obviously he gets fed about 100 sprats when he goes in there as well. But I am the worst as well for little bits of cheese tacks when the fridge opens, and I've cut that out, and that stopped him itching. But I think I've kind of got down his proteins and stuff because, like, making changes, like you say, I don't do it all at once. And normally I message you and say, "Shall I do this?" But I keep a diary of, right, we've had, I think it was lamb. He's good with lamb. Goat upsets him a bit. We're trying pheasant this week, and then I'll give it 2 weeks and change it again. So I think I've got into a pattern. I think the only thing that I would say that would be benefit, what I think would be a bit of a benefit for people who are feeding cooked, because there's lots of raw feeding platforms on Facebook, really, really good ones. But all of the cooked ones that I've found, oh, it's cooked chicken, cooked rice, add sweet potato. It's not a very good cooked platform. So a bit more support maybe around the cooking,
Yeah, well, we've
maybe.
got lots of
Yeah, I found that as well.
yeah,
I don't know. I don't remember which site it was, but somebody put a post on earlier, and they were saying, "Oh, I want to do cooked," but the site that you pointed me to, I don't know if you've heard this, Noble Natural. I don't know if you've heard of it. And then she was saying, "Oh, it's got rice in it though, or it's got this in it though." And I didn't think that was that. And then confusion. It's yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. What's going on? They're recommending this people, and then that person's gone and said, "Oh, you should put this in it," and they're like, "What?" But I've just told you not to put that in. So yeah, it's all a
we
bit
both do. I
like
do
that.
in a different way to you, and there are so many ways of doing it that there isn't one right way. What's important to know is what your dog needs,
Right.
and that's how
Yeah.
we will show you and what we can do. So, for example, my Ted over has been wall fed ever since I've had him for nearly 8 years this year, and in probably no late October, early November last year, I swapped him to cooked. But I do it differently from Alexia, and I do it different from a lot of other. I do it different from you, Mickey. So what I do
Yeah.
is still feed him essentially a raw diet. I still do his 80-10-10, but I do his muscle meat and his organ meat in a pot that I split between breakfast and dinner, and then he has a raw meaty bone. But I just warm up his portion in a pan with some bone broth, add his supplements. That's what he has, because he's an older dog now and his digestion's changed, particularly over winter. He was struggling and he was getting cramp and he was just finding it harder, and I could hear his tummy gurgling, so I knew there was some digestion stuff going on. As soon as I swapped him, everything changed. As soon as I put him onto cooked, everything changed. So I do cooked, but kind of from a raw at 80-10-10 perspective, whereas you do mince and organs and veggies and then add other supplements in. So there's so many ways of doing it, and that's what we can go through on Sunday, Alice. We can go through the options that you've got and how you could build Harry's recipe and what it would look like. But it's understanding what they need, that we need a vitamin D source going and we want some magnesium. But it sounds overwhelming, but when you actually see it in a list, it's not. It's once you've got an
Yeah.
idea of what they need, and that it doesn't matter if they don't get all the magnesium on a Tuesday because their leg's going to fall off on a Wednesday. It doesn't work like that. It's about just creating balance over time, making sure we're rotating through proteins, offering variety, just like us.
Yeah.
It's simple, but it's just understanding what they need.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's also understanding things like a lot of the cooked recipes, you're right. Not only do they talk about adding in some sort of starch, I don't add any starch. I basically do like an 80-10-10 ratio, but I do it in a crock pot, in a slow cooker for
Yeah.
a couple hours. So on low heat until it just turns color. Lucky needs more non-starchy veg than Ted does. I've found, and this is just from experimentation. So if you were to ask me how much exactly does he get, I don't know. I don't measure it, right? I'm not hung up on it, but I prioritize dark leafy greens, seasonal veg, that kind of thing. He doesn't get any potato. I'm not putting any rice, any of that kind of stuff. But I know kind of by eye now, because again, I know him and I've been doing this
Yeah.
a long time. So I know what he tolerates. That if he's not getting enough fiber, I start to see it in the poo. That's how I know that there's an issue. I monitor the poo and I make
Mm.
adjustments accordingly. But a lot of cooked recipes will talk about adding in bone meal, and that's one way that you can get the calcium in. But what I've found for Lucky, so again, when we're talking about the holistic approach to the dog, I'm not just concerned about what's going in the bowl and getting into him nutrient wise. He really needs that enrichment of a raw meaty bone. And he tolerates that. I put him on cooked because he doesn't tolerate raw very well. So again, I saw that through the same kind of digestive issues. He's a cool dog. Energetically heating up the food makes it easier for him to digest. So I just accept, raw isn't the best for him. So people are saying raw is the best. It's not for every dog. It's really
Mm.
so you go for what's the best for your dog. For him, this is how he does really well, but he tolerates a raw meaty bone. And he gets to bite. It's great for his dental health. It's great for enrichment. And that's just as important to me as how many milligrams of zinc he's getting. Like, you know what I mean? It's that whole
Yeah.
but again, once you know the general things of what a dog needs and what your dog needs in the ratio they need it because of their weight, their size, because it's going to be different from my little 4 kilo Chihuahua, right? So you figure that once you know that, then you're like, you're more trusting and it's less fearful and you
Yeah.
figure out like, okay, so I can swap out the bone meal for the raw meaty bone. That's like no big deal. I don't have to measure all of that. In the beginning,
Mm.
it's helpful to measure so you get an understanding, you get a visual of what it
Yeah.
looks like. Because it's kind of like me coming back to the UK. Obviously, I'm Americans, you can hear from. So I grew up with like ounces and pounds. I cannot visualize in grams and kilos. I have no idea. You can tell me 200 grams. I have no idea what that looks like. So I have to measure it out to get the visual. And then once I get the visual, right, I know what I'm working with. It's the same thing when you start off with this. You're not going to
Yeah.
know what 80%, if you're doing
Yeah.
you're not going to know what it looks like. So you measure it out, and that's where the measuring is important in the beginning. So you get that sense, and then it's like, right, I've got this. And then it just becomes like second nature. Totally.
Mm.
Mm.
And you can flip back and forth between the raw and the gently cooked in terms of how you're thinking about putting it together because you know why you're putting something into the diet. So it's not just, oh, I've heard this is good for dogs. The whole like
Yeah. It's
social media influencer superfood effect,
yeah.
right?
Mm.
It's the
Yeah.
understanding the why. That's the bit and what they actually need and why we're putting things in. Which in the recipe that you've got, isn't it, Mickey, where I've put everything in and I've kind of explained why we're putting all those ingredients
Yeah.
in. Not that there's the purpose of them is to fill which nutritional gap, so that you know that if you're doing that over time, but if you wanted to feed them separately, as like if you wanted to do the sprats separately, you wouldn't have to necessarily put them in the cooked. You could have them as his treats. It's just
Yeah.
understand what they need and when they need it, rather than stressing about actual milligrams. It's no.
Yeah. I think I've got
I don't know anyone else that does.
no, I've definitely got a bit more like, oh, that's like 410 grams of sprats, so he'd be fine kind of thing. Like, personally, I can't see us ever going back to raw. Like, he's tolerating this so well, and I think why fix something when it's not broken?
Mm.
And it's the only thing we've ever been able to manage his weight on.
Mm.
And he's gone down from 30 kilos to 25. So,
Amazing. Amazing.
oh, yeah.
What are you guys wanting to know most about in terms of a cooked diet? What would be helpful?
I think maybe like obviously, so you've given quite a comprehensive list of like vegetables, but a bit more about like what fruits and veggies. Because I think in one of the workshops you mentioned like kiwi and avocado and stuff like that, like really knowing what we can include
Mhm.
veg wise and what's like a I don't know, like the cooling
Mhm.
I don't know, like cooling and stuff like that for
Energetic.
vegetables because I got it for the meat. Yeah. So I know like Loki really likes I do a strong like green leafy one. Or he really likes cauliflower is really good for him or a red pepper, but he doesn't really tolerate like well, God knows, quite a lot of stuff actually. But I've kind of worked that out now. So I think yeah, like a bit more about and I suppose for enrichment, he doesn't obviously, you know what he's like with a raw meat bone. I have to
Yeah.
put my hand down his throat to get it back out. We don't
That's
do that. I mean, it happened in the shop the other day, a whole sprat down. But maybe like some enrichment for cooked dogs, because I did used to use raw in like a Kong frozen and stuff like that. Maybe I don't know, some bits like that.
Yeah.
that's a great one. That's fab.
Mm-hmm.
I've just put enrichment.
Yeah, that would be quite good.
I did
That's
the
not,
same
but
thing.
that's not a good thing. We're not cooking the dogs, are we? For dogs on cooked food. That's
The
dog
dogs on cook.
dogs on cooked.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very different distinction.
Very different.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic one. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like
I
that.
mean, when he wakes up for the whole hour that he does during the day and goes back to sleep for the rest of it. But
Just Loki. We know that, don't we?
honestly, it's ridiculous. But yeah, something like that. I think that would be quite good because I don't want to upset the good, gut culture that I'm creating by whacking peanut butter on a Kong or whatever. So what would really help make or like round up what he's already having?
Mhm.
That'd be really handy.
Yeah. And I just had something there. Where did that go? Oh, and it's something that I've not covered in the resource that you've got, but I think some of the herbs and the stuff that we've started doing off of the back of Carol's talks and the other bits, some of the herbs that you can add
Defo.
to support microbiome as well.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a list of like the homeopathic stuff, but
Mhm.
I mean that's a minefield in itself. But yeah, like any herbs, I didn't realize you could add like thyme and stuff, which I'm going to do in my bone broth and add some thyme and stuff into it. But what else can we add in? I wouldn't know where to start.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. That's great. Yeah.
No, I'm pretty much at the beginning of the cook thing, so I don't anything would be useful, but it's just
We've got you, don't worry.
it's a bit of a minefield.
And I
Like what?
I appreciate how that feels right now because
Yeah.
it does. It just feels like I don't know which bit to choose and which bit's right. But if we can show you what Harry needs, then you can start
Mm.
to him as he shows you what works, what doesn't work.
And would something like, for lack of a better term, like an overview of like kind of canine nutrition 101, like what does
Yes.
a dog generally need? Would that be helpful, or does that feel like something you're not interested in?
No, it'd
Um,
definitely be helpful.
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And what kind of format do you guys like those sorts of things delivered in? Do you want it through like a chat like this? Do you do better reading something? Would you like it kind of broken up in some audio that you can listen to while you're on a walk?
I'm easy.
Um, I don't know really. I'm a bit I'm a bit rubbish with podcasts because I always the time I get to do it is in the evening,
Mhm.
and then I'll sit down and I think I'll just close my eyes. I'll just
Oh yeah,
rest them,
we've been
and
there.
then I end up nodding off, and I wake up and I'm like, oh.
I
Oh, they're
missed
talking
it.
about that bit. I wanted to know about that bit, and I missed a chunk out in the middle. So I don't know really. I just
Well, maybe it's shorter things,
whatever you.
like shorter videos, maybe not the like the long podcast, but it's kind of snippets. It's the best, like we could cover fish, why we
Yeah, just little snippets would
yeah,
be
Yeah.
be better.
why we feed veggies,
Yeah.
meat, why we what we're looking for from our meat, and maybe we break it down
Yeah.
like that.
How to put it together.
Yeah, and how to fill the gaps with your nuts and your
Yeah.
seeds and bits and pieces. So they're kind of bite-sized chunks. That probably
Yeah, bite size is
yeah,
better.
yeah. So that you don't get time to fall asleep.
Yeah. It's a bit like the telly in the evening, isn't it? You think, oh,
Yeah.
I just shut my eyes, I can still hear it. And then kind of wake up half an hour later.
Oh yeah, I'm great at that. And then I get a bad neck. Go to the
Yeah.
hospital.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's a really good start. I mean, maybe that is something where we start is back to basics of
Yeah.
what does a dog need? Strip it.
Mm.
And to be fair, when we're working with clients, you kind of think when you're coming in that we're going to tell you like, oh, add all of these other things in, and the reality is you need to strip it right back.
Mm.
Simple,
Yeah.
simple. And then you slowly can add some things in. And again, Allison, when you're aware of what you need to look for and test, then you know, oh, actually, Harry can't tolerate this. But you know that if you've got 15 supplements in and it's just because you've heard this is a good thing. And, you should see the lists that some of our clients come in with. I'm like it's like a pantry of supplements. And it's just and they're like, I'm overwhelmed. I'm like, I'm not surprised you're overwhelmed. You've got a flipping pantry. I mean, it's hard because we just want to do the best that we can for our dog. Hear all of this information, you just throw it all. But in reality, it's stripping right back and actually letting the body do what it does best. It knows how to it knows how to heal.
I phoned the vets yesterday. I think it was the day before, because I said his itch is getting worse again. I think it's my fault because I'm trying to cut out steroids, and I just haven't been giving them to him point blank. And I said it's my fault, but I don't want to keep giving him steroids. So I said, can we try and get on top of the itching and why he's itching? Because it's really not nice to watch him sometimes. And so anyway, we're going to get blood tests done, but she's going to start with like a basic screen just to try and detect whether there is any allergies that are going on, and then obviously if something flags up, then they'll go further and they'll do the food and the environment. And there's me thinking, oh well, hang on a minute, I've heard the food blood tests are not very reliable for picking up food allergies and that, and then it's almost like she could read my mind. And then she was defending it and saying, oh yeah, the blood tests these days are so much better for finding food allergies, they're much more reliable. And I'm thinking, what? And here we go again. I've just been told one thing by one person, and then it's like, and I got a thing with vets as well, trust in them. So I feel like I'm kind of getting battered like one side to the other all the time, and I don't really know what to do for the best for him.
Well, if he does any scratching over the next couple of days before we meet on Sunday, it'd be really great if you could get a video for me so I could see it and where so that I can start looking to and just note the time, or just so that it's on I mean it'll be on the video anyway, won't it, because of the name, the time. But if you can get some recordings of that would be so helpful, because it'll start to give me some clues of some other things that we might need to be considering in terms of where he's chewing, where he's nibbling, the time, all of those things that the vet wouldn't ever kind of consider, because this is what we're looking at the whole picture. So if he does do it, if you could just, and I appreciate that it's awful seeing them when they get into that state, when that constant itching and that that they're uncomfortable and you just want to help them. If you can get some footage, that would be really, really helpful, because it would just give me some more clues to start building a plan to help me. So that would probably
He's actually quite talkative with it as well sometimes, or he'll bark, sometimes he'll bark. But he's quite talkative anyway. But it's just kind of like sometimes it's like he'll get up if we've come in and he's on the bed upstairs, he'll get off the bed and he'll come to the top of the stairs, and it's like he really wants to come and say hello, but oh, hang on a minute, I can't, I've got an itch. And he's like itching and itching and itching. And he's like, sometimes it'll bark. And if it's really bad, he'll just start barking as well, and then he'll be itching. And
But that's good information as well. And also, like, what happened before he started the itching? So was there a reactive incident? Is it when you come home and he's been left? Those kinds of things, if you start to see a pattern, that can clue Stacey into what might be going on. So again, that holistic kind of perspective might not necessarily think at first, could more information to help.
Because you're right to question. I mean, obviously, we'll never tell you to stop any medications, but you're right to kind of question potentially the use of the steroids, just because it is only switching the itch off. It's not actually dealing with the root issue, which is something else that needs further investigation. And obviously, that's not our place to guide you on reducing medications and things. That we can't do that, but we can support you alongside that as you get to change those dosages. And then we can bolster the diet. We can start coming in with some other approaches to support him holistically while you work on the conventional stuff and whatever feels right for you in how you do that and manage that reduction or tapering off of that treatment. So we're just coming in from the other side just to support as much as we can through the diet and all the other angles that we'll look at.
Yeah, that's great.
Right, well, the blood
I would
test,
say
yeah.
trust the process. Like, and I know it's awful, honestly. I've been in tears over Loki, like him making himself bleed. His eyes were bleeding at one point. He couldn't open them. And Stacey kept going, we're almost at the end, we're almost at the end. And it felt like the end was never coming. And then just one day, I think it was like, maybe was it like last week, Stacey, and I messaged you and I just put, look, he looks normal. And he does look like a normal dog again. And he isn't itching. And he's so happy. Like, he is such a happy dog again. And it felt, like I say, it felt like it was never going to come to an end, but it does. You just kind of have to trust that process.
And I think one of the biggest problems with Loki, wasn't it? Because where he'd rubbed his eyes, a lot of the fur had come out, so he was bald.
Yeah.
But as the fur was coming in, the new fur was coming through. That was coming through on sore skin, so that was itching. So we just ended up in this cycle, and it was trying to figure out how we interrupt that cycle and stop it. And that's where Chris came in, because we'd kind of got the diet bit right, but there was still something else. There was another piece to that puzzle that we hadn't quite clicked in, and that was Chris. Chris comes along, we get the right oil, we get the right topical, we get the diet, boom, we're onto a winner. But that was a process of just trying to figure out which bits was happening. But the detox roller coaster can be a bit of a ride, and that's the bit. Because we have to think how long it took them to get into that state and how their bodies got to that place. So we have how we're going to backtrack and how we're going to fix that. And that's going to take some time. And unfortunately, because the vets are really great at giving us things, will stop things quickly, which is how a lot of kind of allopathic medicine works. We just need to deal with the symptom. Like you were saying earlier, we're not actually dealing with the root cause. That's what takes time. So healing is a journey, and it can be a bit tricky, but that's why we want the community to be that, so that we can support each other through that, because that's when you need people.
It's hard. And even like, I was talking to Stacey this past week, the kind of, and I'm going to reflect on this on the podcast of what I did to prep Lucky, and then also what he and I have been dealing with through such a major transition. And I was saying that he wasn't well when I got, he was fine for a few days, and then he was vomiting. He was so itchy, so uncomfortable. And so I can relate, Allison. It was like, and Mickey as well, where it's just like my heart was absolutely breaking. And then I was doing the thing, did I do the right thing bringing him here? That guilt.
Yeah.
And how do I manage that? And not, and feeling like I'm a canine nutritionist, I should know what to do, and I should expect these things. Why am I going? So I go through it too. It's a human thing. Like, we go through it. But I think what was helpful for me, it was that I did have that in the back of my mind. Okay, this is liver stuff. I know what to do with this. So that was helpful. But it was also having Stacey there supporting me with it, which is that community aspect, right? Like, that we overlook in these kinds of things. And we're all human. Things are hard. We love our dogs like nothing else. They bring stuff up for us. They are our mirrors. They are our triggers. They are our greatest teachers. And that often means that it's a really hard ride. And how do we have compassion for ourselves? So it's not just fixing them, but it's also having compassion. What is the wisdom in this experience? And how do I have compassion for myself too? So the community aspect is just crucial to all of this.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, do you guys have any other questions or anything else you want to raise before we kind of wrap it up for tonight?
Don't think so. I'm just excited for what the future holds.
You know me.
Yeah.
Going on.
It's going to be exciting. And, Loki, I'm sure he's going to give you some more problems to work on. So it's fine.
No, he's a work in progress, is Mr. Loki, but we wouldn't have many others. Look at him.
He actually doesn't care, does he?
No, no. If he was any more,
He's snoring away. It's ridiculous. But no, thank you so much for your help so far.
that's all right, my
You're
lovelies.
welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyway, it's good,
And I look forward to
interesting.
seeing you on Sunday, Alison.
Yeah,
All right then.
okay, great.
Thanks.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Take
Bye.
care.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.